The morning sun was still low when Malik stepped off the bus. The air was cool, and his hands tightened around the straps of his worn backpack. It was his first day at a new school, and his heart felt heavy with both excitement and worry. He looked at the tall building ahead, its red bricks glowing in the morning light. Children ran past him, laughing and shouting, but no one looked at him twice. Malik's clothes were clean, but old. The fabric faded from many washes. His shoes had small scratches and the soles were thin. He didn't mind, but he knew others might notice, back at his old school. People judged him for such things. He hoped this place would be different. But deep inside, he wasn't sure. When he entered the hallway, the noise of voices echoed all around. Lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked on the floor, and students moved. In groups, Malik walked slowly, trying to find his classroom. That's when he felt it, eyes on him. A small group of boys stood by the lockers, watching him closely. One of them, tall and broad, whispered something, and the others laughed. Malik felt his stomach tighten, but he kept walking. He found his classroom and stepped inside. The teacher, Mrs. Grant, gave him a polite smile. "Class, this is Malik, our new student," she said. A few students mumbled greetings, but most just stared. Malik sat in the empty desk near the back, placing his books carefully on top. For a few minutes, everything seemed normal. The teacher began the lesson, and Malik tried to focus, but every now and then he heard quiet chuckles from the back corner. He knew they were aimed at him. When the bell rang for break, Malik stepped into the hallway. He was about to head toward the water fountain when someone blocked his way. It was the same tall boy from earlier. "Hey, new kid," the boy said with a smirk. "Where are you from?" Malik answered softly, "From the city." The boy looked him up and down, then said, "You don't look like it. You look like you came from somewhere else. Maybe somewhere poorer." His friends laughed. Malik's chest felt tight. But he didn't reply. He simply stepped aside and walked away. Behind him, the laughter grew louder. During the next class, Malik tried to concentrate, but his mind was filled with the way they had looked at him. He thought about his father's words. "People will test you, son, but don't let them change who you are." Those words were a shield keeping him calm. At lunch, Malik entered the cafeteria. The smell of food filled the air, and the sound of clattering trays surrounded him. He took a seat at the far end of a table. Away from the crowd, he quietly opened his lunchbox, revealing a simple sandwich and an apple before he could take a bite. A shadow fell over him. It was the same group, led by the tall boy. "Wow, look at this fancy meal," the boy said sarcastically. One of his friends laughed and said, "Careful, don't drop it. It might be all he's got." Malik ignored them and took a bite. The tall boy leaned closer. "Not gonna talk?" Too scared. Still, Malik stayed silent. Finally, they walked away, but not before one of them bumped the table, spilling Malik's drink. The cold juice spread across the surface. Soaking his sandwich, he cleaned it up quietly, pretending it didn't bother him, but inside, his heart ached. When the final bell rang, Malik was one of the last to leave. He walked slowly toward the bus. On the way, he saw his reflection in the school's glass doors. His face looked tired, but there was something else. In his eyes, a small spark of determination. He knew this wouldn't be easy. The stares, the whispers, the insults. They would come again, but he also knew something about himself that they didn't. He had faced harder days before. He had walked miles in the hot sun, worked long hours to help his family. This was just another challenge, and he would not let them break him. As the bus drove away, Malik looked back at the school. He didn't see just walls and windows anymore. He saw a battlefield where he would fight, not with fists, but with patience, courage, and dignity. And though today had been hard, tomorrow would be his chance to stand taller. The morning had been long, and Malik felt tired. The classes were new, the faces unfamiliar, and the stares felt heavy on him by the time the lunch bell rang. He wanted nothing more than to eat quietly and be invisible. He walked to the cafeteria, holding his small lunchbox. The noise inside was overwhelming. Trays clattering, students laughing, chairs scraping across the floor. He scanned the room for an empty table. Most were full, but in the far corner. He spotted one that was empty. He made his way there. Hoping no one would notice him, Malik opened his lunchbox carefully. Inside was a simple sandwich, an apple, and a small juice box. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him. He took a slow bite, trying to block out the sounds around him. For a moment, it worked, until a shadow fell over his table. Malik looked up and saw them. Derek, the tall boy from the hallway, was standing there with two friends. They were smiling, but not in a friendly way. "Well, look who's hiding in the corner," Derek said. Malik stayed quiet, hoping they would get bored and leave. One of the boys leaned closer. "What's in the box, city boy?" Without waiting for an answer, he reached over and lifted the sandwich. Malik reached to take it back, but Derek held up a hand. "Relax, we're just curious," he said with a smirk. The boy holding the sandwich sniffed it and laughed. "Plain cheese. You couldn't afford anything better." The group laughed loudly, drawing the attention of nearby tables. Malik felt his face grow warm. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. He remembered his father's advice not to fight with anger, but it was hard to stay calm with everyone watching. Derek leaned on the table, lowering his voice so only Malik could hear. "You don't belong here," he said slowly. "People like you don't last long." Malik met his eyes but stayed silent. Derek seemed annoyed at his lack of reaction. The boys finally placed the sandwich back on the table, but before leaving, one of them accidentally knocked over Malik's juice box. The bright orange liquid spilled across the table, soaking into the bread. They laughed as they walked away. Malik quickly cleaned the mess with napkins, trying not to let anyone see his hands shaking. A few students looked over but didn't say anything. The cafeteria felt colder somehow, even though the sun was shining through the windows. He pushed the ruined sandwich aside and picked up his apple instead. It wasn't much, but at least it was still clean. As he ate, he kept his head down. The laughter of Derek's group echoed in his ears. It wasn't the first time Malik had been treated this way. Back in his old neighborhood, there were kids who liked to push others down just to feel taller, but here it felt different, sharper, more personal. This wasn't just about him being new. It was about who he was and what he looked like. The rest of the lunch period passed. Slowly, when the bell rang, Malik stood and headed for the door, but Derek was there again, leaning against the wall. "Hey, city boy," he called out. "You forgot something." Malik turned, and Derek tossed a crumpled napkin at his feet. "Your dignity," Derek said, grinning. The boys behind him laughed again. Malik stared at them for a second, then simply turned and walked away. He didn't look back, but inside, a quiet anger had begun to grow. It wasn't the kind that made you lose control. It was the kind that stayed, waiting for the right moment. Later that day, in his last class, Malik could barely focus on the lesson. He kept thinking about lunch, about the way everyone had watched and said nothing. But he also thought about something else, about how Derek wanted him to explode, about how much they wanted him to react. And Malik decided something. He wouldn't give them the reaction they wanted. But he wouldn't stay invisible forever either. When the final bell rang, Malik packed his things and walked out. On the way to the bus, he passed by the notice board. In the hallway, a bright poster caught his eye. It was for the school's upcoming sports day. Malik paused, staring at it for a moment. He thought about the afternoons back home when he would run along the dirt roads, how the air would rush past his face, and his legs would carry him farther than anyone else. A small idea began to form in his mind. Maybe there was a way to show them he wasn't weak. Maybe there was a way to make them see who he really was. He stepped onto the bus, sat near the window, and looked back at the school. The day had been rough. But Malik wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. This was only the beginning, and something told him that soon. The afternoon sun was bright, but Malik's day felt heavy. He walked out of class slowly, his head down, holding his books close to his chest. The voices of other students filled the air, laughing, shouting, calling out to friends, but none of them were for him. He had just reached the school gate when he noticed something was wrong. His books felt lighter. He stopped and checked. One of his notebooks was missing. Before he could turn around, a gust of wind blew past him. And there it was, lying in the middle of a puddle, its pages already wet. Malik ran to pick it up. But before he reached it, someone else bent down first. A girl, with long dark hair tied back, lifted the book carefully out of the water. She looked at him with kind eyes and said, "This yours?" Malik nodded, taking the book slowly. The girl shook her head. "They threw it there, didn't they?" Malik didn't answer, but his silence was enough for her to understand. "I saw what happened earlier in the hallway," she continued. "They've been picking on you since you got here." Her name was Sophia. She walked beside him as they left the gate. Sophia told him she had been nuanced too. When she first arrived from another country, her accent made her stand out. People laughed at her when she mispronounced words. Some ignored her. Others whispered behind her back. "I hated it," she said quietly. "But I learned something. Bullies get louder when you stay silent." Malik looked at her, unsure. He didn't like fighting or talking back. But Sophia explained, "It's not about fighting. It's about showing them you're not weak." Her words stayed in his mind as they reached the bus stop. They sat together, and for the first time that week, Malik felt like maybe he had someone on his side. The next day at school, Malik saw Sophia in the hallway. She waved at him, and he gave a small smile back. But before they could talk, Derek and his group appeared again. This time, they blocked Malik's locker. "Morning, city boy," Derek said, with a fake grin. "Or should I call you Puddle Boy now?" His friends laughed loudly. Sophia stepped forward, her eyes cold. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size, Derek?" The group froze for a moment, not expecting her to speak. Then Derek smirked. "Careful, Sophia. Hang around him too much and people might start talking." But she didn't back down. She simply took Malik's books from Derek's hands and handed them to him. "Come on, Malik," she said. Walking away, Malik followed, his heart pounding, not from fear this time, but from surprise, at lunch. Sophia sat with Malik at the far end of the cafeteria. She told him more about her past. How she learned to stand tall, even when people made her feel small. "You have to give them a reason to stop," she said. Malik thought about her words all afternoon. He didn't know how yet, but he was starting to believe he could. After school, they walked to the bus stop again. Sophia pointed out the sports notice board. "Sports Day is next week," she said. "You ever think about joining something?" Malik shook his head. He had never been on a team before, but Sophia smiled. "Maybe it's time you tried. Sometimes the best way to shut people up is to surprise them." That night, Malik lay in bed thinking. The memory of Derek's smirk burned in his mind. He remembered the spilled juice, the whispers, the laughter. But he also remembered Sophia's steady voice. Her words had power, not the kind that hurt, but the kind that built strength he decided he didn't want to keep. Walking away forever, the next day began like any other. But Malik felt a strange heaviness in the air. The whispers started early. Drifting through the hallways before the first bell, he could feel eyes following him as he walked to class. Something was different today. Though he didn't know what, by the time he reached his locker, Derek and his friends were already waiting. Derek leaned casually against the metal door, smiling in a way that wasn't friendly at all. "Morning, city boy," Derek said, his voice smooth but mocking. Malik tried to step around him, but Derek blocked the way. "Tell me," Derek continued, "do you always run away from a challenge, or is it just here?" Malik ignored him, opening his locker to get his books. But before he could close it, Derek suddenly grabbed one of Malik's notebooks. "Hey class," Derek called loudly, holding it in the air. "Our new friend writes essays about how poor he is." Laughter erupted from the students passing by. Malik's face burned, but he kept his eyes down. He reached for the notebook, but Derek pulled it back. By now, a crowd had started to form. Some were curious, some were simply entertained. Derek stepped closer, towering over Malik. "What's wrong? Cat, got your tongue?" Derek asked, tilting his head. "Or maybe you're just too scared to speak in front of everyone." Malik looked at him calmly. "I have nothing to prove to you," he said quietly, but his voice was steady. And a few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Derek's smirk faded for a moment. Then he suddenly stuck out his foot and tripped. As he stepped back, Malik stumbled, falling hard to the ground. The crowd gasped, then burst into laughter. The sound echoed through the hallway, sharp and cruel. Malik's palms stung from the fall, and his books scattered around him. He stayed there for a moment, breathing slowly. He could hear Derek's voice above the noise. "See? Can't even stay on his feet." Malik stood up, brushing off his hands. He gathered his books without rushing. Then he looked Derek straight in the eye. "You can push me down, but you can't make me hate myself," he said. The hallway grew quieter, the laughter fading slightly. Some students glanced at each other, unsure how to react. Even Derek seemed caught off guard. But he quickly covered it with a laugh. "Whatever you say, city boy." He tossed the notebook onto the floor and walked away with his friends. Malik picked it up and walked to class. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear. There was something different inside him now, a sense of strength. It wasn't about winning against Derek. It was about not letting Derek win against him. That small victory mattered, even if no one else noticed. Later, during math class, Malik noticed Sophia watching him from across the room. When the bell rang, she walked up to him. "You did good," she said simply. Malik frowned. "Good. I got tripped in front of everyone." Sophia smiled slightly. "Yeah. But you didn't give him what he wanted. You didn't break." Her words sank in. And Malik realized she was right. He had stood up, faced Derek, and walked away with his dignity intact. That afternoon, Malik stayed after school to help the teacher stack chairs. When he finally left, the hallway was quiet. His footsteps echoed against the empty walls as he passed the notice board. His eyes landed again on the sports day poster, the race. It could be more than just a competition. It could be his chance to show everyone, even Derek, that strength comes in many forms. At home that evening, Malik sat on his bed with his notebook. He wrote down a simple plan. Training every evening, eating better, running longer distances. He didn't know if he could win, but he knew he would try, because after today, one thing was clear. If he didn't define who he was, Derek would try to define it for him. And Malik refused to let that happen. He closed the notebook and looked out the window at the fading sunlight. Tomorrow, he thought, would be another test. But this time, he wouldn't just survive it. He would start building toward the moment when he could finally stand in front of everyone, not as the quiet new kid, but as someone unbreakable. If he could find a way to show them he was more than what they thought, maybe things would change. Then, next morning, Malik walked into school feeling different. He still kept his head down, but his mind was sharper. He spotted Sophia in the hallway, and she gave him an encouraging nod. It was a small thing, but it gave him courage. He didn't know what was coming next, but for the first time since arriving, he felt like he wasn't facing it alone. Malik didn't realize it yet, but the quiet friendship he had just made would become the turning point of everything. It would give him the strength to face what was coming, and soon he would learn that standing up for yourself doesn't. The week passed slowly, but Malik's mind kept returning to the sports day poster. It was like a challenge pinned to the wall, waiting for him to answer. He didn't tell anyone yet, not even Sophia. Instead, he began preparing quietly. After school each day, he would head straight home, drop his bag, and go outside. He ran through the streets, past small shops and quiet houses, his old shoes slapped against the pavement. But his legs were strong. Back in his old neighborhood, running had been part of his life. Sometimes it was to fetch water, sometimes to deliver something for his father. He never thought much about it, but now it could be the thing that made everyone see him differently. At school, Derek's comments didn't stop. If anything, they got bolder. "Careful, city boy. Sports day is coming. You might embarrass yourself," he would say. His friends would laugh, and Malik would just smile faintly. Inside, he felt something they couldn't see, a quiet confidence growing with each evening run. One afternoon, while Malik was at his locker, Sophia walked up. "You've been disappearing after school," she said, raising an eyebrow. "What are you up to?" Malik hesitated, then shrugged. "Just running." Sophia tilted her head. "Running for fun?" He smiled a little. "Something like that." She studied him for a moment and then grinned. "You're going to sign up for the race, aren't you?" Malik didn't answer, but his silence was enough. "Good," Sophia said firmly. "Do it, and make sure you win." That weekend, Malik pushed himself harder. He woke up early, before the streets got busy, and ran until the air felt sharp. In his lungs, his legs ached, but he didn't stop. He imagined Derek beside him, smirking, trying to keep up. And in that vision, Malik always pulled ahead. He focused on his breathing, on keeping a steady pace. The longer he ran, the more he realized this wasn't just about Derek anymore. It was about proving something to himself. On Monday morning, Malik stood in front of the sign-up sheet for sports day. Dozens of names were already there. His eyes scanned the list until he found Derek's name. It was right under 100-meter dash and relay race. But there it was also under long-distance run. Malik took a pen and, without hesitation, wrote his name directly under Derek's. When he stepped back, he felt a small surge of pride. The first step had been taken. Word spread quickly. By lunchtime, students were already talking about how the new kid had signed up for the same race as Derek. Some laughed. Others looked curious. Malik sat at his usual table, eating calmly. Sophia joined him, grinning. "Looks like you just gave this school something to talk about." Malik smiled faintly. Let them talk. That afternoon, during gym class, the coach made the long-distance runners do a practice lap. Derek took off fast, leading the group. Malik kept a steady pace behind him. Some students on the sidelines shouted Derek's name. Derek glanced back at Malik with a smug look. But by the halfway mark, Derek's breathing was heavier. Malik didn't speed up yet. He was saving his strength when they reached the final stretch. Malik picked up the pace, his steps light and quick. He crossed the finish line only a second behind Derek. The coach raised an eyebrow at Malik. "Not bad for a first try." Derek's smile faded slightly. He muttered something under his breath and walked off without looking back. That night, Malik's legs ached, but it was the good kind of ache. The kind that told him he was getting stronger. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the hallway, the cafeteria, the insults. And he thought about crossing that finish line ahead of Derek. Not for revenge, but to show everyone and himself that he was more than they believed. The days leading to sports Days were filled with quiet preparation. Every run was a little faster, every breath a little steadier. Even the students who had once ignored him began to watch him during practice. Some whispered that maybe the new kid had a chance. Derek, on the other hand, seemed restless. He trained too, but his eyes often darted to Malik, like he could sense that something was changing. By Friday afternoon, Malik was ready. He stood by the track after school, looking out at the empty lanes. In his mind, he could already hear the cheers, feel the wind against his face. He wasn't just running a race, he was running toward the moment that could change everything. And deep down, he knew one thing. No matter what happened, he was not the same boy who had walked into the school on his first day. He had found something inside himself, something Derek couldn't take away. A hidden talent, yes, but also an unshakable will. The morning of sports. Day was bright and warm. The school field was alive with noise, the sound of cheering students, whistles blowing, and the crackle of the announcer's voice over the loudspeaker. Banners waved in the breeze, and the smell of fresh grass mixed with the scent of popcorn. From the snack stand, Malik arrived early, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He had barely slept the night before, but he didn't feel tired. Every step toward the track felt heavy with purpose. Sophia was already there, sitting on the bleachers. She waved when she saw him, her smile full of encouragement. "You ready?" She called out. Malik gave a small nod. "More than ready," he said quietly. He could feel Derek's eyes on him from across the field. Derek stood with his friends, laughing and stretching like he didn't have a care in the world. But Malik noticed the way Derek kept glancing his way. The long-distance race was one of the last events of the day. Malik had to watch other races and games before his turn came. His heart thudded each time the announcer called a new event. The sun climbed higher, and the air grew warmer when his event was finally announced. Malik stepped onto the track. 8 runners lined up, including Derek. The crowd quieted slightly, all eyes on the competitors. The starter raised his hand. Malik took his position, his feet firm against the starting line. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. But he forced himself to focus on his breathing. The whistle blew, the runners shot forward, and Derek took an early lead. His friends cheered loudly from the sidelines. Malik didn't chase him. He kept a steady, measured pace, letting the others burn their energy early. By the halfway mark, the gap between Derek and Malik had narrowed. Some of the other runners were already slowing, their breaths coming in gasps. Malik's breathing was steady, his legs moving like clockwork. He could hear Sophia shouting from the stands. "You've got this, Malik. Stay with him." Derek glanced over his shoulder, his smile tight for the first time. Malik saw something in his eyes, not arrogance, but caution. The third lap began, and Malik made his move. He increased his pace, the wind brushing against his face. Step by step, he drew closer until he was right behind Derek. The crowd's noise grew louder. Some students began cheering for Malik now. Derek's friends shouted for him to speed up, but Malik could see Derek's shoulders rising and falling too. Quickly. He was getting tired. On the final lap, Malik pulled up beside him. Their arms and legs moved in perfect rhythm for a moment. Derek gritted his teeth. "You're not beating me," he hissed. Malik didn't answer, he simply pushed harder. The track blurred beneath him. The sound of the crowd became a dull roar. His mind went quiet, except for one thought: finish strong. The last turn came. Malik surged forward, his legs burning, his chest tight. Derek tried to match him, but fell half a step behind. The finish line was just ahead, white tape fluttering in the breeze in the final stretch. Malik's body felt like it was on fire, but he didn't slow down. He crossed the line first, breaking the tape with his chest. The crowd erupted, cheers and clapping filling the air. Malik bent forward, hands on his knees, catching his breath. Sweat dripped from his forehead. but a smile slowly spread across his face. He had done it. Sophia ran. Down from the stands, her face glowing. "I knew you could do it," she said, throwing her arms around him. Students who had never spoken to Malik before were now clapping him on the back. Even the coach gave him a nod of approval. "That's how you run a race," the coach said firmly. Derek crossed the line. A few moments later, his face red and jaw tight. He didn't look at Malik. Instead, he walked past quickly, muttering something under his breath. But Malik didn't need his acknowledgement. The victory wasn't just about beating Derek. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above every insult, every shove, every laugh. He had shown everyone who he really was as the day went on. Malik noticed something different. When he walked through the crowd, people looked at him with respect instead of mockery. A few even congratulated him. It didn't erase what had happened before. But it was a start, and for Malik, that was enough. That evening, as the sun set, Malik walked home with a lightness in his step. The road ahead still held challenges. But now he knew something important. He wasn't just surviving, he was winning, not just on the track, but in the way he carried himself. The race had changed more than the scoreboard. The next morning, the school felt different for Malik when he stepped off the bus. People actually looked at him, but not with the same mocking stares from before. Some nodded, some smiled, and a few even clapped him on the shoulder as he walked by. It was strange, and yet it felt good. He didn't let it make him arrogant. He just walked with his head a little higher, his steps steady. Sophia was waiting for him by the lockers. "You're officially the talk of the school," she said with a grin. Malik shook his head. "It was just a race." Sophia laughed softly. "No, it wasn't. It was you showing everyone you're not someone to step on." Her words warmed him, but he didn't say much. Malik had never cared about being popular. What mattered to him was that he had faced Derek and walked away stronger. By lunchtime, word had spread even further. Some students who had stayed silent before were now openly telling Derek to leave Malik alone. It wasn't everyone. There were still people who laughed behind his back, but the shift was real. Even the teachers seemed to look at him differently. Malik realized that sometimes it takes one defining moment to change how people see you. And he had just lived his when he entered the cafeteria. Derek was sitting with his friends. The laughter around their table was quieter than usual. As Malik passed, Derek looked up. For a moment, their eyes met. Derek didn't smirk this time. Instead, he just held Malik's gaze before looking away. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. And Malik took it as a small victory. He sat with Sophia, unwrapping his lunch for the first time since he'd arrived. He felt like he could eat in peace. Sophia leaned closer. "So what's next for you, champion?" Malik smiled faintly. "Keep running, I guess. Not just on the track." She tilted her head. "You mean in life?" He nodded. "Yeah, always moving forward." That afternoon, Malik stayed after school to help clean up the sports equipment. As he carried cones and hurdles back to the storage shed, Coach Bennett walked over. "You've got talent." "Malik," the coach said, "ever think about joining the track team?" Malik hesitated, then nodded slowly. The idea of being part of a team, of working toward something bigger, appealed to him. "I'll think about it," he replied. The coach patted his shoulder. "You shoot, you've got the heart for it." On his walk home, Malik thought about everything that had happened since his first day. The stares, the whispers, the spilled juice, the tripping in the hallway. It all felt like a test. A test he had passed, not by being the loudest or the angriest, but by being steady and unshaken. He realized that strength wasn't just about muscles or speed. It was about refusing to let someone else decide your worth. When he reached home, his father was waiting by the door. "How was sports day?" he asked. Malik smiled. "I won the race," his father's eyes lit up. And he pulled Malik into a proud embrace. "I told you, son, the strongest people don't fight to hurt others. They fight to keep standing." Malik held on to those words. They were the truth of his journey. The next week, things at school continued to shift. Malik still had challenges. Derek wasn't exactly his friend. And there were still kids who looked for ways to bring him down. But now, Malik had something they couldn't touch. A sense of self-worth that no insult could break, even when someone muttered something under their breath. He walked past with calm confidence. Sophia noticed it too. "You're different now," she told him one day. Malik smiled. "I guess I finally know who I am." One afternoon, as he left school, he saw a younger student being teased by two older boys near the gate. Ugh. The smaller boy looked scared, clutching his bag tightly. Without thinking, Malik walked over. "Hey," he said firmly, "leave him alone." The older boys sneered, but eventually walked away. The younger student looked up at Malik with wide eyes. "Thanks," he whispered. Malik patted his shoulder. "Don't let them make you feel small." As he continued walking home, Malik realized something. He had come to this school as the new kid, an easy target, but now he was more than that. He had taken every insult, every shove, and turned it into fuel. He had learned that true strength wasn't about hurting others. It was about lifting yourself and those around you. And that made him unbreakable. The sun was low in the sky, painting the world in gold. Malik's shadow stretched long on the pavement. He felt light, like the weight he'd been carrying since his first day had finally lifted. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he would meet them the same way he had met Derek, steady, calm, and unshaken. Because Malik wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living with strength, and nothing